Imagine this: two people who once called each other soulmates of friendship, who once shared their most intimate secrets, now stand as strangers. One turns away, eyes cold, voice sharp enough to sever every thread of connection. The other chokes on silence, heart burning with the sting of betrayal. This is not an ordinary quarrel. It is the eruption of hidden wounds long buried. Anger here is not random. It is the roar of the unconscious shadow forcing itself into the light. As Jung reminded us, when the friendly mask falls, the naked truth of the psyche stands exposed, merciless and raw. Have you ever felt that a friend you trusted turns their back? Their silence cutting you like a blade, their absence collapsing your world. In that moment, the anger feels uncontainable, the grief overwhelming. Yet Jung revealed a harsher truth: our fury does not really come from the other person's actions. It is a mirror reflecting back the wounds we carry. To feel abandoned is to hear again the echo of an old fear of loneliness. To feel belittled is to awaken the forgotten child inside us, still aching to be seen. If we wish not to be consumed by rage or shattered by disappointment, we must dare to face this shadow within. And here lies the paradox. What feels like the death of friendship can also become the doorway to awakening. Hatred between friends rarely arises out of thin air. It germinates when old wounds are touched by new circumstances. In our world today, friendship is tested by frantic schedules, by social media that puts every success on display, and by a culture that turns differences into battle lines. A friend who ghosts you for weeks while chasing their career. A photo posted without you read as rejection. A tweet that disagrees felt as betrayal. Endlessly comparing salaries, houses, bodies, likes. Each one pours gasoline on the fire. And when private words are screenshot and mocked, trust plunges from the cliff. Jung would say anger hardens into hatred when the ego is pierced at its deepest symbol. Being left out reactivates the child who once waited uncollected. Being looked down upon awakens the old shame buried in the dark. At that moment, the psyche spins its story. They meant to humiliate me. They never valued me at all. That story fuses with your friend's face, turning them into the enemy. Your nervous system joins the war heart racer mind, obsessing memories, cherry-picked as evidence. The cycle of cortisol, rage, and retaliation transforms friendship into a battlefield. In truth, hatred is often nothing more than the armor we put on against shame and helplessness. Blind to the shadow, we lose both the friend and ourselves. And so in today's competitive, hyper-connected society, the pain grows sharper. A status update becomes proof of betrayal. A missed gathering becomes a verdict on the relationship. Unnamed wounds mutate into emotional violence, mockery, cutoffs, public humiliation. Friendships don't die from differences, they die from shadows left unacknowledged. Jung described this as the moment when the shadow devours both sides. One projects their fear, the other defends, and empathy vanishes. Unless we awaken, hatred spreads like wildfire, turning every bond into an invisible war zone. The challenge then is not to destroy the other, but to look within to see how much of the wound is truly ours to recognize, projection as projection. In that recognition, anger loses its grip and forgiveness of self and of the other becomes possible. When hatred takes root, it rarely ends in a single moment. It spreads like underground fire, turning every shared memory into a blade. The laughter that once comforted now feels like proof of betrayal. So it was all a lie. The photos that once preserved joy now ignite bitterness. They've changed. At this stage, the mind no longer sees a friend. It only sees the mask of an enemy, a projection born of our own shadow. In a competitive world, relationships easily become measures of worth. When you succeed, another feels eclipsed. When you falter, you risk being seen as a burden. Old wounds twist every gesture through a lens of suspicion. This distortion creates a suffocating atmosphere. The closeness that once nourished now drains both souls. Jung pointed out that hatred between those once close burns far more fiercely than ordinary conflict. It is not just the loss of a relationship, it is the loss of a piece of the self. That friend was once a mirror proving you were loved, seen, acknowledged. When that mirror shatters, the void feels unbearable and rage rises as a shield against the terror of loneliness. Yet within that fury, Jung saw a rare opportunity, the chance for awakening. Anger is not only a reaction, it is a message from the unconscious. It asks, why does another's silence shake you so deeply? Why can a single indifferent glance unravel your entire peace? The answer is always within. We do not suffer because the other abandoned us. We suffer because we never learned how to stand when left alone. When we dare to face the fear of being replaced, we discover how much of our worth we have tied to external validation. When we confront the feeling of being invisible, we hear the cry of the inner child long denied recognition. By naming the shadow, we begin to free ourselves from projection. The friend is no longer the enemy. They are only a mirror reflecting what we have yet to heal. If we are brave enough to listen, anger transforms into guidance. It leads us back to shadow work, to face the unhealed wound, to learn how to hold ourselves, instead of demanding that others fill the void. This is the first step on the path of awakening, the path that frees us from cycles of hatred and leads to genuine peace. From the moment we realize anger is the echo of our own psyche, change begins. Friends are no longer only sources of happiness or pain, they become mirrors of our shadow. And instead of rushing into arguments, humiliation, or severance, another choice emerges to step back and observe. Jung called this the act of withdrawing projections, no longer placing all blame outside, but turning inward to ask why our fury ignites so quickly. In practice, this requires patience and discipline. When a forgotten message tightens your chest, pause and ask, what am I really afraid of? Does this fear come from their action or from an old memory of being abandoned? Such questions crack open the door for the shadow to appear. And once the shadow is seen, it loses its destructive power. Awakening does not make you numb. On the contrary, it allows you to build deeper, more mature friendships. Connections no longer based on control or constant validation, but on respect for boundaries and freedom. Anger will still appear, but no longer as a master. Instead, it becomes a signal reminding you to return to yourself, rather than lose yourself in the reflection of another. And so when a person dares to walk this path fully, anger no longer burns like a fire that destroys friendship. It becomes a small flame that lights the way. Each time pain rises, it whispers that there is still a shadow inside waiting to be embraced. Each time we feel betrayed, it opens the chance to see that true worth is not in how others treat us, but in whether we can stand firmly within ourselves. Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In friendship, this means that instead of trying to erase anger or suppress hurt, we allow them to become doors leading us deeper into self-understanding. Then a friend is no longer only a witness to joy, but also a companion who reveals the unhealed parts of our soul. In that moment, anger does not lead to hatred, it leads to growth. Friendship ceases to be a fragile exchange of recognition and becomes instead a space of freedom and understanding. Once you have walked through your own shadow, you are no longer so easily carried away by anger at anyone or anything. You do not lose your emotions, you become the one who holds them. And that is true freedom, the freedom Jung saw as the foundation of spiritual awakening. Yes, there are cracks in friendships and families, even in life itself, that make us feel betrayed or abandoned. But Jung reminds us sometimes these fractures are only mirrors reflecting the fears and shadows within us. When we dare to face them, anger is no longer fire that consumes. It becomes light that guides us into maturity. And it is then that we learn freedom is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to walk in calmness, even in the midst of life's storms. If these reflections have spoken to you, I invite you to stay on this journey with us. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so together we can continue to dive deeper into Jung's wisdom, turning life's daily challenges into lessons for awakening and healing.